The Kingsley mansion looked untouched by time. Windows gleaming under golden lights, gardens trimmed to perfection, waiters gliding between candle-lit tables and crystal glasses. But behind the linen curtains and restrained laughter, there was quiet desperation. The Kingsleys were broke, and this dinner was their last desperate move. They were waiting for a mysterious man, a financial angel, who had promised to invest $900 million in their failing company. No one knew who he was. But when a man in plain clothes and worn-out shoes walked through the door, the laughter stopped, eyes narrowed, and pride spoke louder than reason. What happens when you humiliate the only person who can save your life? At the Kingsley mansion, everything sparkled, except the truth. Beneath the golden cutlery and shimmering chandeliers hid crushing debts, rented furniture, and a silent panic that clung to everyone's chest. That night's dinner was the last hope of a family that once ruled among the millionaires of the American South. Charlotte, stop fussing with that vase. It's perfect. I don't want a single petal out of place when he arrives, said Margaret Kingsley, scanning the grand hall like a stage director on the verge of a breakdown. Mother, he doesn't even know who we are. Maybe he's not coming at all, Charlotte replied, lowering her eyes. He'll come, Nathaniel said firmly, adjusting his cufflinks. Men like Elliot Walker love the feeling of power over the desperate. He'll savor every second. Then let's smile and look less desperate than we actually are, said Margaret, applying a red lipstick that masked the deep lines of insecurity on her face. The clock read 7:55 p.m. He was expected at 8. The buffet was ready, the orchestra was doing sound checks, and the guests had begun filling the velvet sofas of the drawing room. "Who is this Walker, anyway? Has anyone actually seen his face?" whispered one of the uncles, one of the many leeches orbiting the Kingsley family. "No one knows for sure. They say he's eccentric, private, turns down red carpet invites, but pours billions into sustainable ventures. A living legend," Nathaniel answered, raising his cognac in a quiet toast. Outside, the doorman scratched his head. A man had arrived on foot, no driver, no suit, carrying a canvas backpack. He didn't look like a guest, more like a drifter. But he spoke with quiet certainty. "I have an invitation for the dinner." "Margaret, excuse me, we have a situation at the entrance," the butler whispered in the hostess's ear. "A situation?" She arched an eyebrow. "A man at the door says he has an invitation, but he's not on the list, and he doesn't look, well, like a real guest, you mean?" Nathaniel interrupted. "Probably just another nobody trying to sneak in." "What did he say about himself?" Charlotte asked, a strange unease tightening her chest. "He only said, 'His name is Elliot.'" For a moment, everyone froze. Margaret smiled, a fake, mechanical smile. "Elliot? Elliot who?" She laughed nervously. "Please, have him removed quietly. We don't need a scene." Charlotte hesitated. "Let me go talk to him, just to be sure." "Charlotte," Margaret snapped, "you're not putting yourself at risk like that. What if he's unstable?" While the argument played out inside, the man stood patiently outside. He looked up at the glowing facade with a calm expression, like someone who had seen this kind of show before, a house that gleams on the outside and rots from within. He leaned against the wall and gazed up at the starry sky. "Humiliation always comes before the truth," he murmured to himself. Inside the house, tension grew. The orchestra began to play. The guests laughed, oblivious, and the main door remained closed to the only man who truly mattered that night. Just beyond the gates, the man with the backpack watched the door shut in his face. He took a deep breath, squeezed something inside his bag, a thick envelope, and gave a faint smile. The night wore on, and the laughter in the hall clashed with the cold the man felt outside. His thin coat offered little protection against the damp breeze from the lake. But he didn't complain. He simply waited, calm eyes and patient expression, as if that silence spoke louder than any orchestral music. Inside the mansion, Charlotte watched the curtains dance in the wind and clutched her hands to her chest. Something felt off. "Mother, what if that man is Elliot?" "Charlotte, please," Margaret snapped. "You really think a man capable of moving $900 million walks around with a torn backpack and unshaven face? Real wealth can look different sometimes. No, real wealth has class, style, presentation." Nathaniel scoffed and took a sip of his bourbon. "If it's him, perfect. Let him leave. We don't need some eccentric who can't follow basic social codes." Charlotte turned her face away, embarrassed. The shallowness echoed off the marble walls like a grim warning. Just then the butler approached, hesitant. "Mrs. Kingsley." "He's still outside. He refused to leave. Said he'd rather wait. He told me, 'Time reveals who truly belongs at the table.'" Margaret rolled her eyes. "Great. Let him wait. Maybe the rain will talk some sense into him." Nathaniel laughed loudly. "If this is some humility test, we've all failed it, Mother." Charlotte quietly slipped into the kitchen. There, she opened a side window just enough to peek outside. In the dark garden, she saw the man sitting on a stone bench, still, head bowed, elbows resting on his knees. There was something about him that didn't fit with pretense, something real. "Who are you?" she whispered. Back in the hall, the first toasts were raised. "To a new era for the Kingsley family," Nathaniel shouted, lifting his glass. Applause followed. Margaret grinned broadly, but her eyes darted toward the entrance, anxious. At any moment, she expected someone important to walk through that door, wearing a tailored suit, perfectly groomed, flanked by private security, and perhaps arriving in a limousine. The clock struck 8:45 p.m. Suddenly the doorbell rang. The sound was soft, but sharp as a blade. All eyes turned to the front of the house. The butler hesitated. Margaret gave a stiff nod. He went to the door and opened it. There, standing in the warm glow of the entryway, was the man with the backpack. His hair was tousled by the wind, his eyes steady, his hands empty. But he carried something invisible, a presence that unsettled. "Good evening. I'm here for the Kingsley dinner. I was invited." Silence dropped like a stone across the room. The butler stood frozen. Margaret, from a distance, widened her eyes. "Close the door," she hissed through gritted teeth. But the man stepped forward, politely. "I believe Thomas Hale was expecting me," guests whispered among themselves. Charlotte, startled, walked toward the hall. "You know Thomas?" "Since before all this even existed," he replied, glancing around. She frowned, struck by the honesty in his eyes. Maybe you should come in. Wait for him inside, at least." Margaret suddenly appeared. "Charlotte, please, this man is not part of our evening. Send him away now." The man didn't move. He simply looked at Margaret, not with anger, not with fear, and then, with a faint smile, "Funny how some places shine more than they should. Good evening." He turned and left. Charlotte rushed to the door, watching him disappear into the garden's dim lights. He vanished into the darkness, but something inside her had already shifted. In the background, the orchestra resumed playing. Margaret returned to her well-rehearsed smile. Charlotte remained still at the door, whispering to herself, "What if he was the right one, and we were the wrong?" The clock read 9:12 p.m. when the mansion gates opened for the final guest of the night. A modest car without a driver parked quietly beside the imported models. Thomas Hale stepped out calmly, wearing a wrinkled navy blazer and worn shoes, old but clean. His sharp eyes studied the house's facade, brighter than ever, emptier than it had ever been. At the entrance, the butler greeted him with visible relief. "Mr. Hale, finally. Everyone's waiting for you inside." "Apologies for the delay. I had to make an important stop." Thomas crossed the grand hall, greeted by calculated hugs and forced smiles. Margaret rushed to meet him. "Thomas, darling, what would we do without you? We've told everyone. This dinner only happened because of you." He gave a quiet smile. "Let's hope all the guests were treated with the same enthusiasm." Nathaniel appeared, holding a glass. "You missed a hilarious moment. Some lunatic showed up claiming he was Elliot Walker. Backpack and everything?" Thomas's smile faded. "Backpack?" Charlotte approached, still visibly unsettled. "He seemed real, you know? There was something about him. Don't laugh, Thomas." Thomas looked at her gently. "I'm not laughing. I'm remembering." Margaret grabbed his arm, laughing loudly to hide her discomfort. "Oh, forget about that. Let's talk about what matters. Can you believe we're about to sign a $900 million deal?" "I know," he replied, glancing around. "But do you know who you're signing it with?" "Of course we do. Elliot Walker," Nathaniel answered confidently. "And do you know what he looks like?" Silence. Margaret gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, Thomas, don't start with your riddles. He's a respected philanthropist. He's coming. They said he would. He's just running late." Thomas stepped away, scanning the room. He passed the side window. His eyes moved across the empty garden. "You care more about the appearance of who walks through your door than the heart of the one who already came." Charlotte approached again. "Thomas, that man, he was kind. He waited at the door, said he knew you." Thomas nodded quietly. "And you sent him away?" "He was an intruder, Thomas," Margaret snapped, now irritated. "A cheap trick." He drew a long breath. "No, he was a test, and you failed it, spectacularly." Whispers spread through the crowd. Charlotte grabbed Thomas's arm. "Who was he? Tell me the truth." Thomas looked at her, eyes glistening. "Someone who understands the value of dignity, something this house forgot a long time ago." At that moment, the front door flew open with a gust of wind. The butler appeared, pale. "Mrs. Kingsley, he's back." Margaret's eyes widened. "Who?" "The man. The one with the backpack. And he's not alone anymore." Thomas turned slowly toward the entrance. Truth tends to arrive when everyone's already drunk on lies. Guests rose from their seats. Charlotte held her breath. Margaret turned ghostly pale. Thomas simply smiled. The real game was about to begin. Margaret's hurried heels echoed through the hall as she made her way to the front entrance, followed closely by Nathaniel and Charlotte. The once celebratory room had become a stage for tension, all eyes fixed on the half-open door. There, standing with the same calm demeanor as before, was the man with the backpack. But this time, in his hands, he held a thick, yellowed envelope, the same one that had been inside his bag hours earlier. "Mrs. Kingsley," the butler said, voice trembling. "He says he forgot something important and wishes to deliver it in person." "Deliver what?" Margaret asked, her disdain impossible to hide. The man slowly raised the envelope. "An invitation, one final invitation, to the truth." Nathaniel scoffed, stepping forward with his drink in hand. "Of course, let me guess. Now we get a philosophical lecture, right?" Charlotte shoved him lightly, indignant. "Nathaniel, enough. Let's hear what he has to say." Margaret, visibly uncomfortable, crossed her arms. "Fine. Speak, stranger. What is it you want?" Elliot stepped slowly into the house, each footstep echoing like a funeral bell. "I don't want anything. I came to return what was yours, what you burned without realizing it." He placed the envelope gently on the hall table. It was addressed to the Kingsley family, but the doorman said it wasn't worth reading. I figured I should deliver it myself. Margaret hesitated. Nathaniel lunged forward, tore open the envelope, and pulled out a single letter-headed page. He read aloud, "Preliminary investment agreement, estimated value $900,000. Recipient, Kingsley family, pending signature, Elliot M. Walker. The silence was suffocating. Charlotte brought her hand to her mouth. Margaret staggered back a step. This is a scam. Are you the real Walker? One of the guests shouted, standing up. You're joking, aren't you? Elliot gave a calm smile. Playing with people's lives has never been my style, but observing their reactions is unavoidable. Thomas, who had been silent until then, stepped forward, standing beside Elliot. This man waited almost an hour outside. He was humiliated, ignored, judged by his clothes, his beard, his backpack, but not one person, asked his name. Nathaniel tore the paper in a panic. This doesn't prove anything. He could have faked it. This is all a show. Charlotte looked at Elliot, her eyes filled with tears. Why did you come back? Because there are things money can't buy, Charlotte, like respect or dignity, and I needed to see how far this would go. Margaret stepped forward, furious. This was a trap. You came here to humiliate us. Why? Elliot looked her in the eye, steady and unwavering, because the world is full of families who've forgotten what truly matters, and someone had to remind them. He turned. Just before leaving, his gaze fell on the empty envelope on the table. With a calm gesture, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the original contract. Without a word, he tore it in two. The sound of paper ripping echoed like thunder through the hall. Charlotte broke into sobs. Margaret froze. Nathaniel hurled his glass against the wall. Elliot walked out through the door, leaving behind only silence and a room full of unspoken truths. The sound of the torn contract still seemed to vibrate against the walls of the Kingsley mansion, but the silence that followed was even louder. Elliot had left without saying goodbye. Thomas followed him without a word, only with a knowing, resigned look. Inside the house, chaos began to unfold. This was a setup, a staged performance, and you were behind it, Thomas, Margaret shouted, pointing her finger. You exposed us, you sabotaged everything. I tried to warn you, Thomas replied, calm but firm. You were too busy judging labels and manners. Nathaniel kicked over a chair, his face flushed with rage. We lost $900 million over a misunderstanding. What kind of madness is this? Charlotte sat on the sofa, stunned, her eyes filled with tears. Her golden satin dress now felt absurd. The entire party had been a lie. She whispered, barely audible. He just wanted to be treated like a human being. The guests, once ecstatic, were now quietly rising from their seats, whispering, judging, filming. One snapped a photo of the torn envelope. Another recorded Nathaniel's meltdown. This is going to leak, you know that, right? Muttered an uncle, his face pale. Margaret clutched her head. No one can know. We've controlled the press for 20 years. We'll control this too. But it was already too late. Thomas exited the house in silence. Outside, he found only an empty sidewalk. Elliot had vanished like a ghost. One who only appears to teach a lesson. The next morning, the first bomb dropped. Kingsley family loses billion-dollar deal after humiliating unknown benefactor, blared the digital front page of the Savannah Gazette. Clips flooded social media, a video of Margaret dismissing the homeless man, a still of the torn contract, a waiter's comment. He looked humble but confident, like he already knew how it would end. Company stocks plummeted, the bank froze their credit, suppliers demanded immediate payments, invitations to social events vanished like smoke. That afternoon, Charlotte walked into her mother's office. She found Margaret staring at a blank computer screen. You know we've lost everything, don't you? Margaret didn't answer. Mum, what if we really were the villains in this story? The matriarch let out a bitter laugh. Villains? No, we were just too arrogant to see the hand reaching out in the dark. Charlotte exhaled softly. I want to find that man, Mom. I want to apologize." Margaret didn't stop her. For the first time in years, she didn't have the strength to give orders. Charlotte looked out the window as rain began to fall. The reflection in the glass no longer showed a pampered heiress, but a woman on the verge of redemption. The first crack in the Kingsley wall was now a door. Charlotte was up before sunrise. She dressed simply, jeans, a white shirt and her hair tied back. For the first time in years she wore nothing that screamed Kingsley. She got in the car alone and left without telling anyone. The mansion was silent, like a castle abandoned after the fall. Her destination, Thomas Hale, the only link between her and the man who now haunted her thoughts like an unsolved riddle. She found Thomas at his modest bookstore in downtown Savannah. He was sorting donation boxes when he saw her walk in. "Charlotte, I figured you'd come. I need to find him. Elliot. I need to understand who he is, why he did all of that." Thomas wiped his hands and looked at her gently. "Why do you want to find him? To clear your conscience?" "No, to ask for forgiveness. Truly." He nodded, then walked over to a shelf and pulled out an old photo album. He opened it to a page with a faded picture. Two barefoot boys smiling in front of a wooden shack. One of them was clearly Thomas. The other was Elliot. "We met at a shelter. We were street brothers long before titles or fortunes meant anything." Charlotte held the album with trembling hands. "He lived on the streets. Until he was 18, then he vanished, studied, worked in silence, reappeared 20 years later with a fortune and a mission to invest where no one else would. In invisible people." Charlotte cried quietly. "And we treated him like he was invisible." Thomas nodded. "He always said, 'The way you treat a stranger says more about you than 1,000 speeches at fancy dinners.' Do you know where he is now?" "No, but I know where he'll be." Charlotte frowned. "What do you mean?" Thomas smiled. "He visits a woman every Wednesday, Mrs. Alma. He takes care of her like a mother, brings food, plays guitar, listens to her stories. He never misses it. Never." Charlotte jotted down the address and left immediately. The house was humble. Light blue paint, a neglected garden, and flowers clinging to life between cracks in the concrete. Charlotte stepped out of the car and walked to the door. She knocked 3 times. An elderly black woman with white hair tied back in a floral scarf opened the door with a gentle smile. "You're not from social services, are you?" "No, ma'am. My name is Charlotte Kingsley. I'm looking for Elliot Walker." Mrs. Alma's eyes widened. "You're from the Dinner family." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "Then you'd better come in. There's a lot you need to hear." Charlotte stepped into the modest home. Mrs. Alma quietly closed the door behind her. On the table sat a well-worn guitar and a recent photo of Elliot smiling. Redemption wasn't guaranteed, but now it was within reach. Mrs. Alma's house was modest, but warm. The scent of freshly baked corn cake filled the air, mingling with the smell of old books and garden flowers. Charlotte sat in a wicker chair, nervously wringing her hands. With slow, deliberate steps, Mrs. Alma poured tea into 2 delicate porcelain cups. "He told me about the dinner, you know." Charlotte swallowed hard. "I figured he did. But he didn't speak with anger or sadness, just quiet pain, like someone who already expected it." Charlotte lowered her eyes, ashamed. "I've never met anyone like him, so calm, so whole, even after being rejected." Mrs. Alma smiled, her gaze drifting somewhere far away. "You know why he's like that? Because he learned early on that the world doesn't give second chances to people who were never given a first. Elliot was rejected by everything. The system, foster families, schools that didn't accept the poor. So he built his own chance. And he never forgot where he came from. And why does he come here? Because when he was 12, he used to sleep outside my gate. I gave him soup. Later, I let him sleep in the basement. One day, he called me Auntie, then Mom. Charlotte brought her hands to her mouth, overwhelmed. And now he takes care of you. Every week, never missed a visit. Even when he travels, he calls, sends letters, records songs for me. He never forgets. Mrs. Alma stood and walked to a small bookshelf. She returned with a wooden box. He asked me to keep this safe, said that one day someone important would come for it. Charlotte opened it slowly. Inside, a clipped photo of her from a society magazine, and a handwritten note in strong, steady penmanship. The soul most suffocated in that golden house, the only one who might still listen. Tears slid down Charlotte's cheeks like rain on hot glass. He saw me. Oh yes, darling, he did, and he still does. But he needs to know if you want to see yourself too. Charlotte closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the truth. I need to see him, Mrs. Alma. I need to tell him I'm changing, that I want to be someone he can respect. Mrs. Alma nodded gently. Then wait for him. He comes at 5. And bring a clean heart. His has already been broken too many times. Charlotte sat alone in the room, holding the photo and the note close to her chest. The clock read 4:47 p.m. Sunlight filtered in through the cracks in the window. Outside, a guitar began to play. The sun began to dip behind the treetops when Charlotte heard the familiar sound. Guitar strings, played with precision and soul. A gentle, almost mournful melody drifted through the house, landing straight in her chest. She stood slowly, wiped her face, and walked toward the porch. Elliot was there, seated on a wooden bench, his back to her, playing as if he were the only person in the world. The same man with the backpack, but now, through her eyes, infinitely greater. "You came back," she said almost in a whisper. Elliot stopped playing. He was silent for a moment, then spoke without turning around. "I never left. I just became invisible to those who chose not to see." Charlotte swallowed hard. "I came because I need to ask for your forgiveness, for how I acted, for how we acted. You didn't deserve that. No human being does." Elliot stood up slowly and turned to face her. His eyes were calm, but wounded. There was a sadness in them that time hadn't erased. "I didn't go there to test anyone, Charlotte. I went to offer help, to reach out, and I was met with locked doors, just like the old days." She stepped closer, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't recognize you, but I felt something. I felt you were different. And it scared me, because I was raised to fear what's simple." Elliot took a deep breath and walked toward her. "You were the only one who hesitated, who looked, who asked. That's why I came back." So, there's hope, there's truth. And where there's truth, there's possibility, but it won't be easy. The Kingsley name carries weight. You'll have to work hard to wash it clean. Charlotte nodded, resolute. "I'm ready. I don't want luxury without purpose anymore. I want to be part of something real." Elliot studied her, and for the first time he smiled. "Then come with me, but leave the last name, leave the mask. Just bring you." Charlotte reached out her hand. He took it firmly. "Thank you for coming back," she murmured. "I didn't come back for you all. I came back for the ones who can still change." The two walked together into the house. From the kitchen, Mrs. Alma watched them with a quiet smile. The sun finally set, and the night began. But this night was different. It was the beginning of something new. Charlotte returned to the Kingsley mansion 2 days later, but not as an heiress. She returned as a woman. No driver, no makeup, no jewelry. The house's walls felt colder now, the portraits more distant. The golden glow of the furniture echoed like the memory of an empty past. Margaret was waiting in the sitting room, surrounded by papers, phone calls, and frayed nerves. "So, you're back," she said sharply. "I expected you'd run off for good with your little socialist friend." Charlotte sat across from her, calm and steady. "I came back to say I'm not coming back." Margaret dropped her pen. "Excuse me? I don't want to be part of this anymore. Not the company, not the events, not the name. I want something that actually means something, and this name hasn't meant anything in a long time." Nathaniel entered, overhearing. "Perfect. Go live off hugs and handouts. Just don't come crawling back for your inheritance later." Charlotte smiled, firm, unshaken. "Inheritance? What's left to inherit? Debt, arrogance, scandal." "You're biting the hand that fed you, Charlotte," Margaret shouted. "That hand was forced on me. It was never my choice. Now I choose. And I choose truth." Margaret tried to stand, but her voice cracked. "And what are you going to do? Work in a coffee shop?" Charlotte stepped closer, looking her mother in the eyes. "I'm going to work with Elliot. He invests in social impact projects. I want to help change lives, one at a time." "Including mine," Nathaniel laughed. "You've become a joke. You'll come crashing back in 2 months. Maybe, but for the first time, it'll be my crash, my reality." She turned and walked toward the door. Margaret tried to speak, but didn't. There was something in Charlotte's posture that she didn't recognize. Peace. It was as if her daughter had finally found herself outside the mansion. Outside, Elliot waited by an old but sturdy pickup truck. Charlotte climbed in. He looked at her and asked, "Ready?" She glanced back for a brief moment, then looked forward. For the first time, yes. The truck pulled away down the dirt road, leaving behind the iron gates of the Kingsley estate. 2 months later, the scene had changed entirely. Charlotte stood in an old, abandoned factory in one of Savannah's poorest neighborhoods. Sunlight streamed through broken, stained-glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the floor. Men and women moved boxes, assembled simple furniture, adjusted string lights. This was the birthplace of Project Root, a social initiative to train and employ people experiencing homelessness. Envisioned by Elliot, now led by Charlotte. She wore simple clothes, her hands stained with paint, and a smile that spoke of purpose. She walked among the people, listened, asked questions. This was not the Charlotte who once floated between chandeliers and crystal glasses. Elliot watched from a distance, leaning against a stack of wooden boards. "You've found yourself in all this chaos, haven't you?" She smiled, her eyes glowing. "No, I just stopped running from myself." "That's rare and beautiful. Do you think my family can change too?" Elliot paused for a moment. "Maybe, but you've already planted the seed. Now it's up to their soil." That night, there was a simple celebration. Live music, a community barbecue, string lights hung from makeshift poles. Charlotte climbed a small stage made of stacked crates. Everyone listened closely. "For a long time, I lived in a mansion surrounded by invisible gates. Luxury made me feel strong, but I was fragile. Only here, sweating alongside all of you, did I learn the value of building with my hands and with my heart." Applause, cheers, tears. Elliot stayed in the background, quiet as always. Then, like he often did, he disappeared, but not without leaving a note on the table. You didn't need to inherit an empire, you just needed to grow roots. The next morning, Charlotte was seen painting a wall with the children of the project. Her fingernails were dirty, her hair tied in a messy bun, and her smile was real. The moral of the story: salvation doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it arrives wearing a worn-out backpack and tired eyes, ready to remind us that a person's worth isn't in what they wear, but in what they carry inside. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance? What if, in doing so, you missed the chance to meet a billion-dollar heart? Share your thoughts in the comments and pass this story along to someone who needs the reminder. Respect has no price, but it's worth everything. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and challenge the world.